All right, guys, I just want to welcome back to the Everything College Bowl podcast. Today, me and Nick here will be discussing Mel Tucker officially being fired at Michigan State and a couple of potential replacements. They'll be the next head coach moving forward. 2014 record over 3+ seasons for Tucker. 11-2 campaign in 2021. They included a New Year's Six bowl berth. And he was rewarded with a 10-year, $95 million contract extension following that, Nick. It seemed like a complete panic move. You know, James Franklin got one of those big extensions over at Penn State. That one made a little bit more sense. This one didn't one bit. It was just one good season where they lost by 40-plus points to Ohio State the same year. They did beat Michigan. It was a great game. They were able to come back in. But overall, nothing you saw from Tucker in his short time should have led to a massive contract extension like this. And in the long run, obviously, we saw what happened. We'll discuss his termination. But what was your instant reaction in 2021 when he got that extension? Because to me, it felt like a complete panic move from Michigan State.
I totally agree. It felt like a panic move. It seemed like Michigan State didn't want to lose out on a coach during that arms race of Big Ten coaches getting huge extensions. You know, Ryan Day, Jim Harbaugh, James Franklin, all locked in. Other programs, Big Ten, were making moves. PJ Fleck was growing as a coach, and other coaches were making big moves. I think Michigan State worried that if they didn't lock up Tucker to this type of big immovable deal, which ironically enough they found a way to get out of the immovable deal, that he was going to leave and join an SEC program or join another Big Ten program. Specifically an SEC program. Tucker, of course, has coaching experience in the SEC. He coached at LSU in the early 2000s. He spent time at Alabama. He spent 1 year at Alabama. He was the defensive coordinator at Georgia for 2 years. So he has SEC ties, which I think is something that kind of scared the administration. East Lansing, they were worried that one of the lower programs in the SEC was going to come and poach it. Because let's be real, even taking a lower tier program in the SEC is a better job, in my opinion, than taking Michigan State, because at the end of the day, the SEC is the king of college football. I'd rather be at Missouri than be at Michigan State, to be perfectly honest with you. I'd rather be at Kentucky than Michigan State. So I think they were worried that one of those programs would come in and grab Tucker if the buyout wasn't too high or anything like that. So they threw this contract on the table, which just was far too much to begin with, and it really was a bad deal in hindsight. And the fact they were able to get out of it is, lucky for the university. Obviously, unfortunate circumstances. Crazy how this all kind of developed over time. Tucker went from winning the Big Ten Coach of the Year in 2021 to out of a job in just 2 short years.
Yeah, 2022 they went 5-7 coming into this season. They ended up losing Keon Coleman and Peyton Thorne, their 2 best offensive players, to the transfer portal, while the loss of Kenneth Walker to the draft ended up just depleting their run game, and they just were not able to, subdue without those losses. And he was 2-0 before his suspension on September 10th. The USA Today, they had published a story detailing some alleged sexual harassment by Tucker of Brenda Tracy, a rape survivor and anti-sexual violence advocate. She had visited Michigan State's campus numerous times to speak with the team, and Tracy alleged, a pattern of inappropriate behavior, including an incident that apparently had occurred in April 2022. Tucker had characterized it as consensual phone sex, and clearly it has led to a massive investigation that has ultimately led to his firing with cause here today on September 27th after a couple of weeks of continued investigations. This really came out of nowhere. I guess the administration, they were aware of it come end of last year. I think the November, December of 2022, they were aware of this, and it took numerous months, I guess, for the public to finally find out about it. And then, after a couple weeks of suspension, he's officially been gone. $80 million on his contract. He was still due. He's not going to be receiving that, Nick, of course, at least right now. There's obviously a lot of, legal action and whatnot is probably going to be taken regarding that. But currently, right now, that's where we're at. Fired with cause due to these allegations. It really came out of nowhere.
I certainly expect this to go down a long, lengthy legal battle. I'm sure the courts in the state of Michigan will get involved. Michigan State is a public university, after all, that is involved with that. So I think Michigan State will have some sort of legal involvement here. I'm sure there will be a lot to go with that. Public land grant, University of Michigan, I'm sure that they will be involved in the court system. But right now, Mel Tucker, he falls from grace very quickly, fired with cause. Obviously, the $80 million is no longer owed to him at this moment. Like we said, the lawsuits, anything could really happen at that point. This is just a total messy divorce. This has been a messy situation from day one, and certainly is a bad look for Michigan State program. Now, let's be real. They're in free fall on the field right now. They look like they have no pulse right now at all. They're not even playing all their home games this year. They moved one of their home games to the Detroit Lions Stadium, Ford Field. Fan enthusiasm is an all-time low in East Lansing. They're in a tough spot right now. Whoever takes this job, it's going to be a very tough rebuild, I think, because the Big Ten teams have all gotten a lot better, and Michigan State is just stuck behind. I mean, even look at their own division. the teams in their own division are significantly better than the Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, Maryland. These teams are all leaps and bounds ahead of Michigan State right now. They're in a tough spot in East Lansing.
And looking at some potential candidates to lead this program moving forward, obviously there's an interim coach right now in Harlan Barnett who's probably going to be at the forefront of that. We'll see how he does the rest of the season. But I think we got a solid list of candidates here that could certainly be viable for this position. You know, I want to start with Pat Narduzzi, a guy who's been great at Pittsburgh since 2015, 63-43 record, won the conference a couple of seasons back. They've been pretty consistent, I would say, in terms of a winning standpoint. Only one losing season. They're on track for another one currently right now. 1-3 mark to start the year, which is pretty disappointing considering the expectations I had for this team. This is a guy who won the Broyles Award in 2013 that was the defensive coordinator at MSU. I was always thrilled with these defenses. Obviously, Ohio State was always getting the rave. I remember in middle school, that's all people would talk about, how good the Buckeyes were. And I was like, no, watch them play this Spartans defense. They're going to have issues. And that's exactly what happened from 2007 to 2014. He had opposing defenses in this offenses that is in this conference on their heels. He was a linebacker at Rhode Island, a guy that brings playing experience to the table from the Connecticut area. So certainly in that northern region, I think he certainly has some ties. I just think that this is a guy they will look to just because of what he was able to do. Mark D'Antoni's staff, they worked together for numerous times, and obviously I think he's still going to certainly have a bit of connections to the university, and I think they'll even reach out to him for a potential candidates list, and I think Narduzzi will certainly be on that one, Nick.
Certainly, Narduzzi followed D'Antonio to Michigan State from Cincinnati when they made the decision to hire Brian Kelly from Central Michigan back in 2006. He has a great history of being a defensive coordinator, University of Rhode Island, Miami, Ohio, Cincinnati, and then he spent those 7 years at Michigan State where he was really helping build that really talented defense, like you said, under Mark D'Antonio. It's kind of funny that Tucker beat Pat Narduzzi in the Peach Bowl just 2 years ago, and now 2 short years later, Narduzzi might be taking his job at Michigan State. Kind of funny how college football works. I think the salary right now and potential buyout is reasonable here for Michigan State, right? Narduzzi earns roughly $3.213 million a season at Pitt. I think Michigan State can pay that very easily. He's 63-43 overall at Pitt. He has had a pretty good time with this program. They won the ACC in 2021. They won the Coastal 2018 and 2021 as well. 2-4 in bowl games. I think this is a great look here if you go after Narduzzi. Is Narduzzi willing to leave Pittsburgh? They're having a bit of a tough season. They're 1-3 right now. They look like they're going to be probably hovering around 500 this year. Does he make that jump? I'm not entirely sure because I think he could stay there at Pitt and build and bring in a new quarterback, someone they had like Kenny Pickett, and get this team back to compete in the ACC, which I think is a conference as a whole that is a lot more wide open than the Big Ten is.
And looking at another candidate I think would make a lot of sense for both sides, that'd be Jim Leonard, from Wisconsin. He was a coach there from 2016 to 2022. Everyone considered him the favorite to land that job when Paul Chryst was fired and went 5-3 as an interim. And then abruptly out of nowhere in November of last year, Luke Fickell ends up being named the head coach. And, no disrespect to Leonard by any means, because, again, I thought he should have gotten the job. Luke Fickell was going to get that 10 times out of 10. He ended up departing from Wisconsin at the end of the day. He's currently serving as a football analyst for Illinois this season under Brett Bielema. So I certainly think that Jim Leonard, with his defensive prowess, the experience isn't exactly that deep, but if people thought he was primed and ready for the Badgers position, another team up north with the Spartans could certainly be his calling, especially a group that's really struggled on defense the past couple of seasons.
They certainly wouldn't have to pay him as much if they brought in Jim Leonard, like you said, right now, a senior football analyst at Illinois, has that great experience as a defensive coordinator and defensive backs coach at Wisconsin, interim head coach, like you said. So I think there certainly is room to make this move. He was 5-3 as the interim head coach. Is a pretty good number considering where that Wisconsin Badgers team was after firing Paul Chryst. I like Leonard a lot here. I think he probably should have kept his job as defensive coordinator at Wisconsin, or at least should have got a defensive coordinator job somewhere in college football, maybe at USC or Alabama, but he ends up not getting a job. He ends up being a senior analyst, which is certainly a temporary position for him. This would be a great move for Michigan State. I think he's a good guy that knows Big Ten football inside and out. You're recruiting someone that's been involved with coaching at a different program in the conference, a successful program in the conference. This would be a home run hire for me.
Yeah, now looking at one that you brought to our attention, Charles Huff. He's been the head coach at Marshall for the past couple of seasons. Marshall, they were just unhappy with Doc Holliday. It seemed kind of like Paul Chryst at Wisconsin. The ceiling had been met because Holliday was great for Marshall for a span of a decade. He won 8+ games for 4 straight years, or 3 straight years rather, and they went 7-3 in the COVID year. So great winning percentage for his final 4 years of his tenure. He also had 3 10+ winning seasons. They fired him though, and they went with Charles Huff. That is a pretty big gamble to do that. And I think that's a lot of respect being shown to Huff as well. They brought him in from Alabama, who was the running backs coach for a handful of seasons there. And he showed up and he implemented a newer style of offense. And that really transcended this team, at least last season. 9-4 record, along with a great defense. Lance Gabriel, of course, he's the defensive coordinator now for Miami. But he's been able to coach up both sides of the ball here, went 7-6 in his debut year. But the offensive prowess was certainly evident from the start. They're certainly putting up a lot better numbers. And they also beat a top 10 opponent last year in Notre Dame. The Irish really struggled in the kickoff last season. But this is a team that can play football. Marshall, they're incredibly tough. They're disciplined. They have a great running game as well this season. And the defense is still tough, even with Gilroy's departure. So Charles Huff, despite only being 40 years old, this is a guy that has had plenty of years of experience on Power 5 staffs, including under Nick Saban. This would be an interesting hire here, Nick. It could certainly help transcend an offense that's also kind of fallen apart in East Lansing. Do you think he's too young for a position like this?
I think this makes a lot of sense for Michigan State right now. I think Charles Huff would be in a great spot. He's had experience in the Big Ten as well. He coached at Maryland before they're in the Big Ten, but he's coached at Penn State as well under Joe Moorhead. He followed Moorhead to Mississippi State, where he was the associate head coach. Then he spent 2 years at Alabama as an associate head coach and running backs coach. Was there for their 2020 national championship team. He also coached at Western Michigan for a little bit in 2013. He's a good offensive coach. Marshall, so far under his record, they've beaten the 2 Power 5 teams that they have played during his tenure, including going to South Bend, Indiana, and beating Notre Dame on the road, top 10 ranked Notre Dame. They won a bowl game last year against UConn, looked pretty good in that bowl game. I think a lot of people, you and myself included, picked them to win that bowl game. That seemed like a pretty layup for them. I think this would be a great hire. He's not going to be super expensive. He's a guy that's very energetic, very excited, building a program in Marshall. He's 19-10 overall so far. I think this would be a slam dunk hire for Michigan State because you can get him on the cheap. He's an energetic guy who's coaching under Nick Saban, coaching under some other great coaches. This would be a perfect hire for me.
Now look at another Group of 5 head coach that has a little bit more experience. Jason Candle, he took over famously for Matt Campbell when he departed for Iowa State, and he's been the head coach ever since late 2015. And they've had winning seasons each year since. They went 6-6 in 2019, but other than that, they've been well above 500, 57-33 record. 2 MAC crowns, including one last year behind a powerful defense, a nice balanced offense. Jason Candle, I don't know if he's actually interested in leaving Toledo. He's been there since 2009. He's pretty much had his entire coaching career there with the Rockets. But this is another guy who's, been able to build up a pretty stable program. And that's what Michigan State's really looking for at the moment is stability. I think this will probably be their 4th or 5th candidate if they strike out on some of these other guys above or whoever they're going to contest. So I don't think this would be great. I'd probably consider a C+ hire because Toledo hasn't exactly been elite by any means, but stability and consistency are some things you're going to get with Candle. And, of course, working under Matt Campbell, no slouch there.
I added this one because I thought it was interesting. There is this sort of theory that you want to stay at a long time at one program, but some coaches want to eventually make that move. And after since 2016, after nine seasons as the head coach, it might be time for him to make the jump up to a bigger and brighter thing with Michigan State. I think Candle's a good coach. Toledo, they had a great defense last year that won the MAC. They were 9-5 last year, won the Boca Raton Bowl. Right now, they're 3-1 and playing some pretty good football. They could certainly win the MAC again this year. A very talented roster they had. He's a good recruiter. Coaching in Ohio, he knows that sort of Big Ten territory. Has recruiting ties set up in there, obviously less than the Big Ten teams. 57-33 overall record. 43 years old, a young coach with some experience. I think Candle will be a nice hire here.
Now you look at Willie Fritz, a guy who has plenty of experience. He's been a head coach since 1997, had a multitude of destinations, spent since 2016 at Tulane, and he's also really built this program up. But consistency certainly hasn't exactly been ideal other than just the past couple of seasons, less than 20 games. They went 2-10 in 2021, and I had expected them to be a contender for a bowl game, a 6 to 8 win team. Flat out were awful. And in 2022, they ended up being that football team we expected. So just a year late. That's pretty concerning, Nick, when the team was not able to perform. 12-2 last year, Cotton Bowl victory, off to a 3-1 start this season. This program's also been a little bit stable. They went 7-6 back-to-back seasons, 6-6 in 2020, and then of course again that disappointment where they had 10 losses in 21. Willie Fritz is a veteran that's certainly going to bring plenty of discipline. A guy that has an old school coaching style. He's also been able to adapt more of a modern style of offense here. I'd say that has plenty of toughness with running the football. But he's been successful everywhere he has been. Michigan State, this is also probably not going to be their first candidate. Willie Fritz, though, he's been very good to build this program into a pretty respectable one there out in Louisiana.
I thought it was an interesting hire to look at. He's had some good records in Division II. He was at Central Missouri for a very long time, over 10 years in Division II. Then he made the jump to Sam Houston State and won AA. They made back-to-back Division I AA national championship games and lost those games. And he made the jump up to FBS ball with Georgia Southern, 9-3, 8-4 Georgia Southern, 17-7 overall. Pretty good record there. Then he goes to Tulane. It's been up and down, right? 46-46 overall at Tulane up to this point in the season. So 500 coaching, but 12-2 after going 2-10 to get that turnaround, beating USC in the Cotton Bowl. A huge win for the program, a huge energy moment for the conference as well. They're 3-1 this season with their one loss being to a pretty good Ole Miss team from the SEC, and they were competitive in that game. They kept it close at halftime. They certainly had opportunities to beat Ole Miss in that game. I think he's a great coach. I think Tulane's a good team. Willie Fritz has got a lot of experience, a traditional coach who has adapted a more modern offense as well. He's won the Bobby Dodd Coach of the Year award. He's won the AAC Coach of the Year award, Sun Belt Coach of the Year. I think this would be a good hire because this guy could just coach solid football. And again, he'd be in that nice, probably $3 to $4 million a year salary range, which I think is something they can afford considering how much they paid Tucker was too much. They're going to look to kind of rein in that salary per year.
Now looking at the final guy on our list, Pat Fitzgerald was the head coach from 2006 until this past summer with Northwestern. Some allegations of hazing had came out. His team and his coaches came out and they backed him whenever the decision was made. But at the end of the day, the allegations of hazing and, mental assault towards players who had poor performances, at the end of the day was too much for them to continue to keep him there. And, that's wild. They didn't seem to give him much of a leash. He was suspended for 2 weeks and then that was the initial diagnosis, and just a couple days later they went ahead and fired him, a guy who had been there for almost 2 decades. This is a guy that you're going to be jumping from one scandal to another with Pat Fitzgerald, but I think this would be the best option. This is a guy that would bring you back to D'Antoni style of ball with, they always seem to have tough linebackers, and this is probably the best linebacking coach in the country, and Pat Fitzgerald implements plenty of toughness. And again, I think his players and coaches certainly cared for him whenever the decision was made. A lot of unhappy people there from Northwestern. This is probably not going to happen because of all the, antics and whatnot's going to come with it. But if they were able to pull this off and they were able to tune some of that nonsense out, and if some of the allegations did end up not becoming true, I think this would be a great hire for Michigan State, typical Big Ten football coach.
I think the hire would be fantastic. I just don't think it can happen. Obviously, if they do hire Fitzgerald, you would imagine the NCAA would lay down some sort of suspension for him, probably anywhere from 4 to 6 games. I would estimate at this point. He was Big Ten Coach of the Year in 2018, Bobby Dodd Coach of the Year in 2020, 2 Big Ten West titles 2018, 2020. Overall, a career 521 record as a head coach, a 110 and 101 record, 5-5 in bowl games, College Football Hall of Fame player, and a great coach. Really was a stable coach at Northwestern. It seemed like that program was going to be his forever. They were very stable. There were some up and downs there, but they, 10-3, 9-5, 9-4, 10-3, 10-3. These are some impressive records considering we're talking about Northwestern football here. It's a shame how it all went down and how it ended, which is why I think that it's not going to happen for Michigan State here because they're already, like you said, dealing with one PR nightmare. Jumping boat to another one just doesn't seem like the best idea. I feel like the upper heads at Michigan State will certainly not make a move like that. But then again, you never know. College football, winning is what matters. And, you're bringing Pat Fitzgerald, you're going to win football games. That's for sure. Yeah,
I don't really have a prediction. If I had to guess, I think Leonard's probably going to be the favorite on this list just because he probably should have been the Badgers head coach. And obviously, he has plenty of ties to Wisconsin, being a great player there. And of course, his entire coaching career was there. But I think this would be a good opportunity for him to be where he belongs as a head coach of a program. And I think Michigan State, they can certainly turn to a young guy that has plenty of upside.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Huff as my prediction. I think Charles Huff is going to be the guy here. We've seen him beat big programs. They beat Notre Dame. They've beaten some other programs in the Power 5. I think Huff is a young guy who has experience coaching under great coaches in different programs, Big Ten experience at Penn State. I think Huff would be a great gamble here for Michigan State. They're a rebuilding program. Give him a long leash. He can bring in some nice recruits. He's a great running backs coach, so they'll bring back that sort of Kenneth Walker type of ground and pound, absolutely dominant on the ground mentality. I think that would work out great for Michigan State.
Yeah, some interesting prospects here for them to look towards for the upcoming season or coaching carousel, that is. That's be it for today's episode, Nick. Unfortunate one here for Mel Tucker and the Spartans, but that's just the reality of it.
Certainly wasn't expecting to have coaching carousel talk this early in September. I do love talking about the coaching carousel. It's a shame how it ended for Mel Tucker. I hope he can land on his feet. Probably end up in the Nick Saban coaching rehab program at some point.
Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.